Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devin Decker, and joining me, my host companion and the poobah of Frasier, Sejan Sarwick. Sejan.
Hey, Dev. Oh man, hey, it's been a bit of a week.
It has been a bit of a week. And I think I'm just going to start it off with probably the crowning achievement of this particular week between Say Reports. George Clooney definitely listens to our show, right? I did.
That's not it's not necessarily the conclusion that I came to, but I'm curious how you got there.
Well, because we talked about amalgam actors,
hmm
and we talked about it being possibly the worst idea ever. And a good old Clune Dog heard that. He got himself an amalgam of actors and delivered what may have been the worst solution ever.
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely so for anybody that is not aware, why don't we talk about what
Yeah, we
happened
should.
first, and then we can. So, because I don't necessarily agree that it was the worst solution ever. I just feel like it's a great thing for them to do, but it really doesn't have anything to do with these particular contract negotiations. Is my kind of feeling on it. And we'll talk about that in a
Which is
second.
that? I mean, that's why I categorize it. And granted, with like hyperbolically as the worst idea ever. All it really kind of does is weaken their negotiation location to be like, well, we can take care of the issue that you're having with a completely different union. We'll just fix it internally. Because, like, also that's not what negotiations are, right? It feels like
Yeah.
it's another head to battle when, like,
Right.
we
So,
don't need
so
that.
again, why don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you break down a little bit about exactly what was said this week?
Yeah. So George Clooney, with a cabal of actors ranging from between 6 and 15, based upon the various reports, and including the likes of Ben Affleck, Tyler Perry, Emma Stone, Scarlett Johansson, again, based on various different reports, went to the SAG-AFTRA leadership and said, we really want to get working again. So here's what we're proposing. We should get rid of the cap on membership dues. Because currently, right now, in SAG-AFTRA, the most amount of money that you would have to pay for dues to be in that union is $1 million. Is your pinky up to your mouth, Siege? And I couldn't resist. Is $1 million. So what Clooney and his cabal said is that we'll get rid of that cap, and that right there should generate like $50 million extra dollars a year. Right there.
Right. But the important thing to remember about that is that what that is for the union. That doesn't have anything to do with people. So
Yeah.
what that does though is it puts the union in a position to support more people. Here's why I don't think this is the worst idea. This is part of the reason why I don't think this is the worst idea ever. Part of the issue with the strike is that as the union move goes on, they are paying people. We talked about this that are out of work right now. The union is stepping in to support those where it can, and the hope on the producer's side, the hope on the production side of this whole thing from the studios is that eventually SAG will run out of money, so it can't keep taking care of those people, and then at that point, those people are going to come groveling back for jobs. So by proposing that they pay more in dues, it actually solidifies a bigger stream of incoming cash for the union to continue to keep going. So it's actually kind of a bit of a big fuck you to the studios to allow these AAA, like A-list actors to come in and pay as much as whatever they deem necessary at that point, because it can actually keep the union afloat a lot better. So that's part of the thinking there.
Right.
And then the second part was just a complete flip on the residual payment. And this is where it kind of gets kind of weird in that, like, I understand that this would definitely be part of the contract, so it is something that they would need to be discussing now, but the idea that it was proposed as something that would be beneficial to anybody on the studio side is wild. It doesn't really affect anything on that end. But essentially changing the structure of residual payouts from top down to bottom up, which is really interesting because, I mean, like, especially for a guy like George Clooney, right? Like you get a guy like Clooney in your movie, and it normally costs $14 million for him to be there, say, but he says I'll take $4 million instead, and then I'll take $10 million if the movie is actually successful, and they'll write out what those markers are for if the movie is successful, right? And the thing is like people across the board will have these kinds of deals. The idea being that like you get paid this amount of money, but at some point, if this does well enough, then we will come back to you and pay you more and more and more. And the way that that's traditionally worked is top of the call sheet down. So guys like Clooney would do that. He'll get his $10 million, but if the movie only made 15, then that means there's $5 million left for everybody else to kind of get what they can out of it. So what was happening to a lot of the times is guys at the bottom of the call sheets were not getting anything. Is how you hear about these actors that are in these like long-running franchises that have been in every movie, and then you find out that they're only making like $25 a year off of the residuals on it being out there, and it's like that's ridiculous. This is a multi-million-dollar like blockbuster film. Why is that? Well, it's because they were far enough down the call sheet that everybody else got their ducats first, right? And so what they're proposing is going the other way. Is bottom of the call sheet up, get to your residual checks first, until it maybe gets back to somebody like Clooney at the top, and at that point, maybe he doesn't get his 10 million, maybe he only gets 6, which is still $6 million.
Still $6 million. Still life-changing money for most people. Like
right. So again, really, really interesting. Really, really, like I think it is actually an important part of kind of this concept of trying to support one another and all that. It's just the idea that it is touted as in some way that is going to stop. I mean, the only thing I can think is that the hope is that with these kinds of things on the table on this end, and then the kind of negotiation on this end, showing the actors working together to get this stuff sorted out, all it does is strengthen their position in terms of the fact that they look like they're the only ones like willing to do anything. Right now, the studios just look like assholes, and now their method of starving the actors union out is actually got a bit of a dent put in it with this proposal if they go forward with it.
Well, I mean, it's already been shut down. They already said no, we're not going to do it. That one was reported less. I think I did send the article where they're like, that doesn't really help us with what we're trying to do. And honestly, this wouldn't be news for any other union. Unions have discussions like this all the time. It's because it's a group of 6 to 15 of the most famous people in the world that are having this discussion on this thing that, is kind of spotlit in the world right now, that we even hear about it. And I agree. Where the reporting kind of hits me as strange is they're making it sound like the actors are offering this if we accept the offer that's on the table.
Yeah, that's why like tying it to the whatever's being brought by the studio, I think was the biggest mistake. Because like these are definitely things that need to be considered. This is definitely things that it's cool that they want to open those kinds of doors and stuff. It's just like it is so not the conversation that everybody else is having.
Yeah.
And I think what that speaks to is something that we've kind of talked about all along, is that when people think about Hollywood, they think about guys like George Clooney, they think about Scarlett Johansson, they think about guys like Tyler Perry, right? Like those are the people they think of. So when they hear that the actors want more money, they poo-poo that shit, right? They're just like, yeah, of course they do. They think of them as greedy. They think of them as already getting too much. What they're not thinking about is that 90% of the people that work on films are not those people, right? And this kind of shows that insular like bubble that guys like Clooney at that level kind of live in. That again, like I applaud him for looking outside of his bubble, but he really can't see too much further beyond what's right out there, huh? Because like it's so not what the conversation is right now.
Yeah, it's it is not the discussion right now. I do like that it is them putting their money where their mouth is, saying that we will step up and we will do it. And
just to focus specifically on the dues part of it, it is actually a really interesting move when you consider that some of the biggest blows in terms of the studio plan, again, to just like wait out like the unions, those all kind of started to go up in flames once we started seeing guys like Dwayne Johnson like throwing $140 million at things and stuff like that, right? Like we were hearing about all these record donations coming in from these larger players because they wanted to support the little guys, and those were really great stories. And I feel like that's kind of where this idea gets born from, right? Is, well, instead of just one-time donations when things get bad, why don't we just make sure that there is just an indefinite stream of cash flow to the union to keep up these kind of fights. But to propose that in a way that implies that will somehow like convince them to take a shittier deal from the studios because they're suddenly getting more money from within, that's not how it works.
Well, I mean, that's why the language that is in the proposal, where it'll raise us an additional $150 million over the next 3 years. I think the other hope was, and maybe this is just me reading it and how my interpretation is we take the shitty deal that they're offering us right now, we're getting that influx of cash to the union so that the next time we come to the negotiating table, we are prepared to actually get what we want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
again, I think these are definitely things that the union should definitely consider when that is the time to consider it. Yeah. But this is just not
the time to do it. And but at the same time, and the other thing I like about this is the money that they were going to be giving was supposed to be earmarked for medical coverage for people, making sure that threshold is lower. It actually detailed where that money was supposed to go, not just going into the coffers of the union, because it also seems like it was a response from these people to the talk of the levy, the dollar levy on every single subscriber to every streaming service. I mean, you've heard of this as well?
Yeah, I think it actually was brought down to, I think, 52 cents once they went back and redid the math and decided to not include sports and reality TV. Because the initial dollar amount was based on like a more vaguer streaming customer number, but when they, rightly, somebody called them out on their math and were like, well, you're including a lot of things in that you guys have nothing to do with if you say that, right? Like, why are you getting money from Major League Baseball all of a sudden? So they went back to the drawing board and they were just like, okay, we got to redo this math a little bit and make it a little bit more specific. And so I think they got it down to 50, something like 52, 54
like 57 or something like that. I know it's between 50 and 60. I can't find it right now because
and it would probably vary depending on the service, right? Because Netflix doesn't have a lot of live sports, so they'd probably be paying more than other companies like ESPN, Disney, right?
Exactly.
But yeah. So they basically were looking at subscriber counts and saying our stuff is up there in perpetuity, supposedly, at least at the whim of the studios. But if you're gonna support your business by having us basically constantly on call for people to watch, we want a part of that, right? We want a part of that money. That gets a little bit more difficult when you look at things like home video sales and stuff. Like subscriber stuff, it gets really weird because it is still so murky how they count that shit, right? Like, are they talking about watch numbers, or are they talking about subscriber numbers? Are they talking about full watch numbers? What happens if somebody starts your movie and doesn't finish it? Do you owe Netflix money then at that point? Like, what? Like, where trying to figure out that whole thing is hard enough as it is. Add to that also gave the studios the ability to come back and be like, that's basically like $800 million a year that we don't have, which I don't know how I feel about that, but that is a very big, scary number to be putting in front of people and say, this is what the actors are demanding from us. That doesn't look good.
Yeah. It's strange. That was the strangest part of this whole thing. Even stranger than a bunch of the elite of Hollywood being like, we will pay more of our dues. Like, why are we capped at 1 million? But then that also, think about that. Imagine paying $1 million to be a part of your union. Like, that number isn't, the whole thing is a game that we will probably never fully comprehend. It's just that,
right. $1 million sounds crazy until you consider that Kloondog brought in 300 million last year.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That it's less than 10% of what he makes.
Right.
Just real crazy. I love calling him Kloondog. It is one of my favorite things to do. It's been a time over there, and I don't know. But that levy, as it were, and as it was presented, looked like it was just going into the union's accounts for use by the union at their discretion. And they never said that, we're going to use it for health care or to make sure. So I think that's why that got so murky and why it was able to be spun the way it was. Look at how much money they're asking for. That's more than we, little HBO and Time Warner, are making. Is it though? What?
It's a weird
place to vilify people.
Well, but it's yeah, but also a really easy one. Like I don't know why they didn't see that coming. That like we're gonna put this number out there and we're not gonna be able to really defend it in a lot of places, especially because you hear that while also the overarching conversation. It's really interesting the whole streaming conversation about subscribership and stuff as it is because you would think from the way that everybody online would talks about this stuff that subscriber rates would just be in the freaking toilet lately, right? Except that Netflix just announced that it just added like 9 million people or something. Like it's crazy. Like their rates went up, they cracked down on the password sharing and they started eliminating like they started to introduce the ad supported model all within the last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of that happened and they added 9 million subscribers this year. So like so the story is that streaming is still fucking booming. But when the zeitgeist is talking about streaming as if it is like on the verge of like, a death every second, every time Disney talks about raising its prices, everybody talks about how that's it, they're canceling. Right. So with that being kind of the story out there, and then you come forward and say, we want $800 million, no questions asked about where it's going to go. And it's all because of subscriber rates. It's kind of hard for people to kind of fall
Not
into your camp
subscriber
then,
rates,
right?
man. Subscriber numbers.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, because all I can think of, the closest analog to me is when Papa John's was like, you want Papa John himself, not Papa John's the companies, but Papa John was like, you expect me to give health care to my workers? Have fun paying $17 for a pizza. And it's like, wait, what? Where they're the villains because you would raise your price to pay for medical? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like,
No, yeah, but it's all about how you got to spin that story, and
yeah.
like you said, like not having a detailed, specific plan for where the money was going to go, not a good look. Having this initial number that came out of $1, and then having to go and eat crow a little bit on that because you didn't consider like one of the major aspects of that, right? Also, one of the big things that has kind of gotten brought up, and again, this is just muddying the waters more than it is clarifying anything, but like the idea that people are subscribed to multiple services. And so this idea that it was presented by a couple of people on the studio side as this tax they want to put on subscribers, the subscriber tax, right? And when people hear shit like that, and then they think, and I'm subscribed to 6 different services right now, does that mean I'm going to quote unquote be taxed 6 times for the same thing? No, I'm not down for that, right? Like it just it got spun so quickly against them, and and it sucks that there was not somebody with a more deft hand at play there, you know?
Yeah, it was just like, I cannot believe how poorly this has gone. Yeah, it just, the whole thing was.
But I will also say that the argument from the SAG side through all of this week, as much as they have kind of fallen on their face in a couple of places publicly, I do think that they've got a pretty strong defense in the idea that that they're just like, we don't understand why they stopped negotiating with us. If we introduced something that they didn't like, the whole point of negotiation is that you then counter that. So like the studio's just packing it up and being like, we can't work with these people is still pretty fucking ridiculous.
Yeah,
Like
I agree.
walking
It's
away
one of
from
those.
the table with their entire workforce on the other side of it, like is just crazy to me. No matter how outlandish demands may be, like this was, for all intents and purposes, this is kind of just the beginnings of their negotiation. As much as they've been on strike for the longest in their history, they
Right.
were ignored for the first 2 months of it. So like this is really only the first step in their actual negotiation process, and immediately the studios were just like, nah. And it's like, what? Really? That's like, this is head scratching.
Yeah, we're recording this on Saturday, the 21st of October. So it is officially the 100th day of the SAG-AFTRA strike that we're recording this. And that, like Sejan said, this is the longest that they've ever been on strike. And then the last thing I have to talk about on this whole thing is, it is lawyers who are in that room with the negotiation. So you come back to those lawyers with, we want this levy, we want $1 for every subscriber to these things. As a lawyer, you look at that and think, well, they kind of just shot themselves in the foot, right? The spin that we can do here to weaken their position, let's just walk away and leak that that's what they asked for. Like, you need to think like a lawyer. like a negotiator. And unfortunately, this isn't some negotiation that's happening behind closed doors. I mean, it is happening behind closed doors, but it is also on a huge stage. So when they walk away from something like that, they can color the opinion of the people that these actors are serving, which is us, right? The audience, and make them mad at them and be like, maybe that will force their hand to taking this offer that is worse than what they were offered at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like it's all kind of just gross and grody. And it has been something that has taken over parts of my mind as I'm not going to talk about any of them, but I got into the spirit of Halloween this week with a lot of movies. And it's just like, it really kind of like, why do I got to think about like what's going on? It's just been awful. It's not been great. And then there's also the one that like they had to remind their members not to dress up as characters from Struck Work for Halloween. Like that's a whole other thing that at least says we're probably not going to be done with this in October. And that stinks. But I'm going to read the quote because I love it. Choose costumes inspired by generalized characters and figures. Ghost, zombie, spider, etc.
A spider.
I'm the spider.
The Halloween spider. Ho, ho, ho.
Well, now I want that. Now we've created a fantastic character for the annals of the Say Report backlog. I don't know. I mean, is there anything else on this that you want to talk about? Because we got really fun things to discuss as well.
No, I was gonna say my week wasn't this.
Oh, okay. This was my week. Sorry.
My week was trying to find a goddamn Sonic game that actually is a Sonic game. You know, they make a lot of Sonic games that aren't really Sonic games, Dev.
Yeah, they do. It's
I just spent so much time this week trying to like nail down like what would qualify for your task to the point where I started to get a little angry at like Sonic and Sega.
Which is
I found myself playing Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine.
I
right?
did
Like,
not go to 4 years of medical school to be referred
Pinball,
to as Mr. Robotnik.
Fucking, but then like some of the weirder ones of like Sonic Adventures, it's so fucking it's crazy how much that character Sonic, this character that we are going to talk about in actual like historically important facts later, but like where he stands now as just this super influential important character in the history of video games. And there is not a single run of Sonic games that you can point to as A, the core games, and B, like the fan like respected games, right? Every single iteration of Sonic has had just its share of detractors, and on top of that has changed things up so much from one thing to another that there's no logic, there's no rules to Sonic, right? And like the best that I can compare it to in something on the Nintendo side of things would be like Wind Waker. When Wind Waker came out and it really threw a lot of people for a loop. It really had a lot of people that were in that moment trying to say, this is what I really want from Zelda games, and they could point to a slew of them that gave them that, right? Or they could say, like, this style in this one, they could point to specific things they didn't like and all that, right? Imagine that kind of initial reaction to Wind Waker with none of the mea culpa later on of it becoming secret, like, one of the biggest, like, favorites in the genre. So, like, that initial reaction to just every fucking Sonic game since, like, Sonic 2. When Sonic 3 / Sonic Knuckles came out, like, there was all this talk then about how people were, like, feeling like they were cheated because the game was really 2 games and half games. And then there was finally a full version put out, but it was on a very specific, like wasn't that one only available on Sega CD or something? The full Sonic,
full version with
Sonic 3 plus Knuckles
Sonic 3 and Knuckles, well, I mean, it was the add-in thing where you could game Genie by plugging in.
Yeah, that's right. You could combine them with like a cord or some shit together, right?
Well, not a cord. I mean, it was legitimately the top of Sonic and Knuckles flips open and has another cartridge slot where you slam in Sonic 3. in order to finally get the full experience.
So like you had to like build your own like card at home.
Yeah. And it's weird because on some level you get it. Like expansion packs had existed on PC games prior to what happened with Sonic and Knuckles being essentially an expansion for Sonic 3. And then come to find out years later, oh no, we released a half finished game and now here's the full game and you had to pay us full price both times.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and they presented it as if it was something. And now, like, you know, there are straight up, there's a split in the fan base of people that consider Sonic and Knuckles to either be Sonic 4, which now there is actually Sonic 4 stuff out there, but that's a whole kettle of fish because people then also
hate
take
that
issue with
game.
that, right? Right. And then there are people that call it, you know, Sonic 3.5 and all that stuff, right? No, but just to kind of like, before we get too deep back into the Sonic stuff, where I ended up finding myself outside of that is I actually found myself in the only corner of the Sonic fandom that seems to have any true support and cohesion and community, and it is in the Sonic.exe shit. Like how how familiar are you with some of this sort of like indie game like creepypasta Sonic
So
stuff
I
that
know that
exists?
it exists. I have played, God, multiple times in retro battle. I've had to do Zolf or Snolf. It's called Snolf, which is Sonic Golf, which is a whole big part of the ROM hack community to turn the Sonic games into golf games.
Yeah.
And that's just like that is where
so
it
that's
is.
what it is,
Yeah.
right? Is like the fan created material in the Sonic world is really the only place where you see huge amounts of community support and cohesion for projects, right? To the point where like it was a fan made game that eventually got turned into Sonic Mania, right? Like that
It
or
was
something. One of
fans who were making games who were originally hired by Sega to make Sonic Mania.
Right.
So,
So Sonic Mania is a team made up of people that were really big in the Sonic fan game
yeah.
community. Like because Sega eventually even had to admit this seems to be the only place where we're getting any traction. We're not in on it. And in a very unlike Nintendo move, much to Sega's credit, rather than like shutting that shit down so that they were forced to only play Sega based, you know, properties, they actually went and were just like, you guys want money to legally do this? you know but yeah, so I found myself in the Sonic.exe shit. I mean, also because it is the spooky season, right? Like, so that stuff is just popping up on my YouTubes like left and right. And it's just fucking, it's wild to me that like there's this kind of just like running ROM out there of, and you know, there's various different versions of it. So what it is it's a cracked cart creepy pasta, you know, like for to get down into the like the simplest version of it, you hear these stories online, and you know, these are not true stories. Like this is not me saying that this actually happens to people, but rather people just share them like ghost stories about like getting cursed versions of games, right? And that became really popular when the kind of the ROM hacking stuff took off in the late 2000s, early 2010s, where people could, first of all, start to make like some really crazy ROM hacks that could represent some of this stuff to back up some of their ghost stories, and two, like just we were all playing these things, so like that becoming part of the milieu of these kind of creepy stories online like totally made sense because we were all kind of getting in on it. We all kind of had those moments where we were downloading something from places like LimeWire or, you know, maybe Pirate Bay or something like that, and you were going out there and getting your Mario hack so that you could play some Super Mario, and then all of a sudden you turn it on and it's, you know, it's 20 megabytes of hentai or some shit, right? Like it's not what you thought it was when you downloaded it. And
no,
that's
it's
how these stories
better.
always are, right?
Sorry.
Right? Yeah, right. You just like that's what these stories always were, was that you got this game from somebody, you bought this card off of somebody on eBay, you downloaded this ROM from this you know, kind of weird website, or Discord chat nowadays is also something that gets worked into them. And then when you turn it on, something's not right. And one of the most famous ones of all time is Sonic.exe, to the point where, like I said, there's multiple versions of it out there. People have created actual ROM game, like playable games in this universe. There's I think sequels to the original one and stuff stuff like that. It's this crazy little rabbit hole of just like this cursed Sonic game. And for a long time, it was kind of the only way to experience fun Sonic shit and talk to people about Sonic. Because any other thing that was coming out that was Sonic related, either you didn't like, or if you did, nobody else did. So you couldn't talk to anybody about it.
I will, to cite an example from my own life, Sonic Heroes was a game that we all had the day off when it came out. And actually, would you mind looking up the release date of Sonic Heroes as I tell this little anecdote?
Is that the more like 3D walk around one? But like, I seem to remember like you could play different characters for different levels. Am I thinking of the right one?
So it's sort of like the third Sonic Adventure game. But like instead
Rogue the Bat can fly, Knuckles could climb,
right.
Sonic could run.
So that's Sonic
that
Adventure 2, what you're describing. Okay. And Sonic Adventure 2 is broken down into the light story and the dark story. And the light story is Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles going through levels, and each level you're assigned one of them, and each character has their own style of level. I remember
a part playing Rogue the Bat in a tree, like
that's
flying,
and that's what the dark side is. So it's Rouge the Bat. It's not Rogue, it's Rouge, like the makeup.
Yeah, I always call her Rogue, and
that's understandable.
That it's Rouge, but I will always call her Rogue.
And that's fine. It's the same letter, Siege, into just the G goes before the U or after the U. And where it's Shadow, Rouge, and it's one of the Eggman robots. Like, he has a name, but it's not the same name as the robot from Sonic Adventures, because the end of his Epsilon is his name. He dies
Lipstick.
At the end of his
name Lipstick?
No, his name's not Lipstick. That'd be clever though, right? If it were eyeshadow, rouge, and lipstick. No, he's just another robot. So you play through the game essentially the same levels, but either as the heroes or the villains, and they're those teams of 3. And the follow-up to that was Sonic Heroes, where each
2003, by the way.
2000. No, I need the date though.
Oh, you need the exact.
Yeah, I need the exact date. Because I think we took off school is just the truth of it. So, but in Sonic Heroes, you have those two teams. You have the Sonic team, which is Sonic...
December 30th.
Wow.
So you would have actually probably had...
We were probably on winter break.
Yeah.
If that would actually make a lot of sense. Because we did not have school. We went and we bought Sonic Heroes the day that it came out. And the way that the game goes... You have Sonic Team, which is Sonic, Tails, Knuckles. You have Shadow Team, with his Shadow, Rouge, and I really don't remember who the third one is in that game.
Is this the one with the gun?
No, Shadow the Hedgehog is the one with the gun. That's just straight Shadow the Hedgehog.
Just Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
Okay, just his game. Well, that's 2005. A couple years later,
yeah.
It looks like. Okay. Yeah, this is... They all blur together from
and that's understandable. So then you also have Team Amy Rose, which is Amy Rose, Cream the Rabbit, and Big the Cat, and Team Chaotix, which is Vector the Crocodile, Charmy the Bee, and the Chameleon, whose name I can never remember.
Espio. So it's Espio.
Espio the Chameleon.
And who's E123 Omega?
Omega. Okay, yeah. So, and that's the one who's in 2 as well. So Omega.
And he's considered a spiritual successor to 102 from Sonic Adventure.
Yeah.
So he's in that same like robot line, but is apparently a different robot.
But I think they also the talk is that it might be the same processor that they put in there, which is why he's like quote unquote more noble. Or whatever the bullshit is. But yeah, so you have those 4 teams of 3, and as you play through the game, you're assigned one of them for each mission, and then you switch between it. And, Sonic and Shadow, they move fast. Rouge and Knuckles, they can float. And then Tails and Omega, they have firepower. But then you get to, you have, your strong character, your fast character, and your technical character. Is kind of how it breaks down. And you play through Sonic Heroes as each of those teams. And what we did is we didn't have school, so we went and we bought that. It was 4 of us, and each of us took a team. So we took turns as our team came up, and we played through the game. And it was an incredible day where we finished Sonic Heroes that day. But then nobody at school wanted to talk about Sonic Heroes. So it became this one shining moment that the 4 of us had. It was like our Stand By Me was beating Sonic Heroes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then you
Or the
all
body.
realized you were the only ones that had any love for that game.
Yep. And that is just how it goes. And it
Yeah.
continues through the line. Like you talk about the last Sonic that I think really did have any traction is Sonic 2. I mean, and what I did for this one, task wise, is I have Sonic Origins. I bought that on the PlayStation 5 when it came out because I was excited to see the anniversary mode, the like updated high definition, and see how it plays. But they also have the classic version of all those games. So, I mean, first of all, I'm going to admit it. I did this 30 minutes before we started recording because every time I tried to play Sonic this week, I just was like, no, that's not going to happen. I have better things to play. And I feel bad about that because, like, as a kid, there were some of my best moments. One of my favorite moments, and I feel like I've told this before, but was driving home from school, like a senior was taking me home, and like I knew he liked Sonic the Hedgehog. I'm like, can I ask you a serious question? And he turns down the radio, and I'm like, when was the first time you beat a Sonic game with all the Chaos Emeralds? And he seriously considered that question. And we had like this deep philosophical discussion about the first time we realized that collecting the Chaos Emeralds is the true goal of the Sonic games and when we accomplished it. And that's just...
It wasn't really until I was playing stuff like Sonic Adventures that like the idea of there being deeper stuff to do in Sonic games really kind of opened my eyes a bit. You know, like we've talked about this before, but that idea that there you can the way that Sonic is designed, like, and the idea is you were told Sonic's got to go fast. Like you roll into a ball, you go as fast as you can, you get to the end, right? Like, and so there's this thing that like when you first play Sonic, and I feel like this must be the case for everybody, is that you just do that. You just go and you just start racing through stuff, and it kind of becomes this like speed challenge of how fast can you get through like levels in the game and stuff, you know. And that was the way that we always played Sonic 1 and 2, and it never really occurred to me that you could like explore or should explore, and that's where stuff like the Chaos Emeralds come in. And it's an interesting style of gameplay, especially when you compare it to what it was like going up against with Mario, where like the whole like Mario has a lot of that same kind of idea. You can definitely rush to the end of levels if you want, but it's much more interesting of a game, Super Mario specifically, if you explore a bit, right? Or even Mario Brothers 3, right? Like you can get around the map in different ways. You can find ways to jump over and skip things and blah blah blah. But the difference between the two, at least for me in my little brain, like Super Mario encourages you to explore like immediately. Like it shows you like, hey, there's things here beyond just getting to the end of the level. And like it does that by introducing the idea of pipes with different like cool bonus areas. It does it with vines that grow up to the sky, and you're like, well, I gotta climb that and see what happens. And it does it with like keyholes, and you see a keyhole, but like you're like, well, then there must be a key somewhere, so you go looking for it. Sonic doesn't do any of that, at least not in 1 and 2. There's no bigger thing like showing you like, hey, like stop for a moment. Don't like literally stop for a moment. Stop running. Like that, no, everything implies to you that you need to get the fuck out of there. And like it really does those games a disservice, because once you realize that there's exploration aspects and that the idea of speed and stuff can actually be used to like open new areas and levels and stuff, once you kind of get your handle on that, those games become so much more interesting.
Yeah, and to talk about that, like Mario, when you get to the end of the first level to go into the next level, he goes into a pipe. So that is the game showing you Mario can go into pipes. So then the next time through level 1, you're trying to go through the pipes. You can go through the first level of Sonic the Hedgehog, the first game, like 50 times before you get to the end of it with 50 rings and see that big ring at the end. And even then, like you might not know that you can jump into that big ring and trigger a bonus level. Same with Sonic the Hedgehog 2. The way that the bonus levels work in that, where you collect the Chaos Emeralds, if you have 50 rings when you pass a checkpoint post, like, and then you have to stop and look back and jump into the halo of stars that shows up. I will give it to 3. I mean, it requires some exploration on your part, but with bigger levels, like higher levels, as opposed to, because Sonic 1 and 2, they kind of just have 3 levels, the bottom, the mid, and the high. And you look at the game like that and the way that it plays, and that's how it is. But like in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, you have to go between the bottom, the mid, and the high in order to make progress. Where in
Mhm.
Sonic 1, you can stay on the low road the entire way and get to the end of the level.
Well, and so
Yeah.
the argument being that that was kind of the bust of not including all of the Knuckles stuff, because Knuckles was good at that part, right? Like the exploration, it was so well focused on the exploration, really does open up the idea of that with Sonic, but without a third of your tool set there to do so when you first got the game, it's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah. What I wanted to do when I played the games this morning before recording was to get a Chaos Emerald in all of the games. And getting a Chaos Emerald in 1 and 2 was easy. It was cake. I mean, 2 took a little bit of time because I took a hit and I lost all my rings. So I had to get back up to 50 before crossing the halfway post so that I could go to the level. But then playing in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, I'm like, I don't know where the first ring is. I know how to like stumble upon them, but like to do this as fast as possible, I'm not sure where that ring is. And I eventually found it. It's in like the second part of the first level, which that's the other thing is that the first level is broken into 2 parts because of when you come across like the fire robot that burns the forest down. Because they were also on like a real like we need to save the environment kick with Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which it's not a problem. Like I'm not saying like what a stupid thing to do. It's just you can feel that influence from the 90s, specifically in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Where almost all of the levels are
absent. It's not like it's absent from 1 and 2, right? Like the whole idea of like saving the animal creatures and saving from the robot forest,
from the industrialization. Yeah,
right. Like that is definitely present in those games. It's just that what 3 is doing is just better at storytelling than the first 2 are, because there's not a lot going on in terms of the storytelling in 1 and 2. You can infer a lot from the interactions that you have here and there and the little bits of dialogue I think that Robotnik gives you, right? He's got some stuff that he likes.
No, he's completely silent protagonist.
Oh, see, yeah, then it's
antagonist.
Completely silent, right?
Yeah.
But you can infer from some of the interactions and stuff. Also, we inherently, because it was the 90s, understood that the guy in the robot suit going around and caging up animals was definitely the bad guy, right?
Right. Where in 3, still, like, no voices or anything like that, but halfway through the level, you come upon a robot that's shooting fire, and it burns the forest down. Right. When you get to Hydrocity Zone, and that's how I'm going to say it. I'm not going to say Hydro City. I'm putting it on record. I think it's Hydrocity. It's one word, so why wouldn't you?
Look, you already know my stance. The Sonic creators have no idea how words work. So
right. Hydrocity Zone, like you see the pollution when you fight Robotnik, where the water that you've been able to like go around in and collect, bubbles to continue breathing, that doesn't even work anymore because it's so dark with pollution. They do a pretty good job like visually telling you that, and that's pretty great. But I mean, it's hard to get over the fact the big thing that this week was about, right, where we're going to play a Sonic game, we're going to talk Mario, is because Sonic Superstars was coming out 3 days before Super Mario Brothers Wonder. And what a foolish time to release your Sonic game. I'm so sorry. Like, for some people, they wanted to get it, and they wanted to play it, so that, we'll play it before it gets swallowed up in Super Mario Brothers Wonder. But the people who did that, almost every single person was disappointed by the length of that game versus how much you paid for it. This was not a $60 game. And some people are like, it took me 5 hours to beat it. This was not a $60 game. And it's like, I mean, we were paying $60 for Sega games in the 90s. Were those Sonic games any longer or any better than what you just paid? And then
time is not an immediate measurement for quality, right? Like there's perfectly fine like 5 to 10 hour experiences that I would gladly pay that kind of money for. Now, I have the benefit of hindsight, having had those experiences, and then I can say, man, if this had been $60, like I think of something like a Portal game or something like that like I enjoy the hell out of and have played so many times that while it only takes me 10 hours to get through, I've done it 7 or 8 times. So does that mean that I've put 80 hours of time into it? Does that make it worthy of the $60 mark, right? So like time is a hard one. But I will also say I have to ask, I guess is what I mean. like, are they saying that it takes them 5 to 10 hours to get through it if they do it, as I said, just going from beginning to end, not really delving into it? Like, is there more to explore in that game that people are just not doing?
From the person that I saw it, that was 5 hours to 100% it. Like, get all the Chaos Emeralds. And then, I mean, that was playing as Sonic, and you have four more players to play through the game as, 4 or 5 more players. So it's, if you were to go through it that time, that becomes a 25 to 30 hour game if you're trying to 100% it as every character. But if the experience as Sonic wasn't fun, like, I guess I go back to, I really loved Sonic the Hedgehog games on the Game Boy Advance, and that comes down to, I like fully cleared Link to the Past, the Game Boy Advance version, on a road trip, and I'm like, I want to play something, so I went into a Walmart and bought Sonic the Hedgehog Advance, and found this really long, involved, enjoyable experience, and it was a Sonic the Hedgehog game. Now, that was $30, right? Because that's how much a Game Boy Advance game cost. But I didn't think about the cost. I just thought about, wow, what an incredible experience. And then I had gotten that game on a whim, on a road trip with my family, and then I get home and I'm like, go to Walmart and see that there's already a Sonic Advance 2 out. So I buy that and have a little bit less fun because they try to expand upon the game. That, like, people thought the last one was I'm like, too easy. Like, I had a blast with it. And then again, like, within a year of finishing that, 3 came out, and I went and I bought it, like, on the day. Because the Sonic Advance series, like, there are 3 really good experimental chapters in the Sonic universe that, like, that I had a blast with. But I don't...
Now, what makes them experimental compared to any other new version of Sonic? You know what I mean? Like, if there was in order to be experimental, I feel like there has to be a baseline for what a Sonic game truly is that makes them different than, well, they're different because of this. But the problem is I can't really pin down a baseline, like, set of what a Sonic game is, right?
So for me, Sonic the Hedgehog was Sonic the Hedgehog 2. That was always my, like, gold standard Sonic the Hedgehog game. So right at the start of high school, I had been wanting to get a Neo Geo Pocket Color for, like, ever. And when I eventually found one on eBay, literally my first eBay purchase ever was a used Neo Geo Pocket Color that came with the Neo Geo Pocket Color port of Sonic the Hedgehog 2. And playing that game, and, you know, like, it's a non-backlit screen and all this other stuff, I played that game through to completion, and they added, like, a final fight with Robotnik after Death Egg Zone. So, like, I'm like, oh, that's cool how it built upon it. So, like, not only... I mean, I also was a Game Gear kid. Game Gear gang for life, right? Triple G. So I played those Sonic handheld games, and those games kind of sucked. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Game Gear is garbage. And it mostly boils down to what's up?
Well, because it had to be 8-bit, right? As opposed to, like, Sega's whole, like, thing of being, like, this high-end graphics machine compared to the Super Nintendo. The Game Gear didn't have that kind of horsepower, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
But it was higher end than the Game Boy, so it was higher end than its closest competitor. The problem that I have with Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is the first boss is an Antillian. You know, like one of those monsters with the proboscis coming up from the sand. And Sonic cannot hurt this monster. What you have to do is hit its pinchers of its proboscis so that they're open, and then a bomb will fall into it. And, like, it is not like any other Sonic boss fight you've ever experienced. Because most Sonic boss fights are hit the thing, don't get hit yourself. So, like, this more cerebral puzzle thing, and you're riding in, like, mine carts, but the mine carts force themselves to the edge of the screen, and then the camera doesn't move any further. So it's, like, all, like, quick reaction on a very small screen. So it just it's not a good one. So then to go from that experience, I mean, Sonic Triple Trouble on the Game Gear is probably one of my favorite Sonic experiences ever. I'll just admit that. But, like, nobody has ever played it because, I mean, even though I know, like, 4 other people who I joke are in the Game Gear gang with me, like, I don't know a lot of them who ever played Sonic Triple Trouble. There is a remake of it that I have played that is excellent. But again, that's a fan-made game, like you were talking about. The fans are the ones that have kept the Sonic series afloat, and Triple Trouble is just another example of that. Sorry, to get back to what we were talking about, though. Sorry, I had to go off. That was my experience with the handheld Sonic games, where like they were never very good until I played the Neo Geo Pocket Color version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and was like, wow, this is really great. So then like that's the reason why I'm like, I guess I'll give this Game Boy one a try. And when you're in like the first boss fight is not just you in a like locked screen fighting Dr. Robotnik, but you're running on a bridge, like avoiding cars and hitting missiles back at him. Yes, now I know that was just lifted from Sonic CD and the race against Metal Sonic in that game, but it was the first time I had ever experienced it, and it was still on a handheld system. So it was like the Sonic like sprite, what Sonic looked like was completely new. They had made him look more extreme. Not necessarily in line with something like Sonic.exe, but it's probably the closest like comparison I could make. Okay. So playing that was really cool, but it was still kind of at the end of the day a regular old Sonic the Hedgehog game. Sonic the Hedgehog Advance 2 requires more exploration in order to find like the Chaos Emeralds. I've never collected all of the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 Advance, because you have to go through the levels and in one run collect all 7 of the red rings in order to get to the Chaos Emerald. I've only done that in 3 of the 7 levels. 3 of the 7 worlds, sorry. 1, 2, and 6. And I just like, I have no like desire to go back. And then you get to Sonic the Hedgehog Advance 3, and you want to talk about experimental, like that's the reason why. Not only like throughout the games they've been giving you can play as not just Sonic. Like Sonic Advance, you can play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy, and each of them play very differently. So you're essentially buying a game and having 4 different experiences. And then Sonic Advance 2 is where they introduce Cream the Rabbit, and that is a whole other like different kind of a crazy way to play the game that is like so un-Sonic. And then for 3, you create teams of 2 characters. So like playing on the Sonic and Tails that was introduced in Sonic 2, you could go with Sonic and Tails or Sonic and Knuckles or Sonic and Amy or Sonic and Cream. Or you could go with like Tails and Cream. So there are, essentially but 20 separate combinations of players and teams that you can be, and each different combination of players makes the game a different experience. And that is super cool to see like how Knuckles and Amy react together going through this game. It just like,
I mean, and while I personally don't have like a history for this stuff, like it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact like there are definitely fans of all of these games. Right?
Oh yeah.
It's just the problem is that trying to get any of these guys to come to a consensus on whether or not a game is quote unquote good, right, or like worth it, or if how it works in the larger scheme of Sonic game, like it's just impossible to get Sonic fans on the same page about any of this stuff. Because like these games even ended up getting like re-releases on like later consoles and stuff. Like people play these games still. like the Game Boy ones were on the Wii U. You just mentioned that there's like the remakes of the originals that came out on PlayStation. I mean, we have all the,
I mean, anniversary collections for Sonic were a huge cornerstone of the GameCube, because the GameCube sort of became the Dreamcast Lite in the way that the Xbox was Dreamcast 2.
And it was a really good way for Nintendo to really kind of just rub some shit. They got really petty about when Sega stopped making consoles and started doing third-party development for other things. Nintendo then like kind of ran with that, like being able to release on the GameCube a collection of 6 Sonic games that like, yeah, they could only give you 1 on a cart back then, but we'll give you 6 now. It's like kind of a big old like dick swing move by Nintendo.
Oh, and then to go like further than that, so the anniversary collection for Sonic that came out on GameCube, because of that exclusivity that Nintendo like scooped up immediately, but then when that eventually broke down and Sega's revenge was going to PlayStation and being like, hey, we can release the anniversary collection on yours as well, but we'll also put all of the Sonic Game Gear games on the version for yours. So you'll have Sonic Anniversary Collection Plus. Like, they, as much as we like want to say that, you know, Sega was getting mud kicked in their face by Nintendo, they played it the way that was most profitable for them.
Well, it's part of the reason that it could not have been an easy decision to pull the plug on physical like console like hardware sales, right? Like considering the kind of uproar that they had made being the competitor to Nintendo, it is all but admitting defeat, right? Like when they decided they do not want to make a physical console anymore. But they weren't stupid. They did that because they needed to. And it's why we still know Sega is out there making games today.
I mean, you
if they
say
had
that
continued trying to make hardware, they would have gotten swallowed by Nintendo or somebody else by this point.
Right. They looked at it. I mean, they had 4 failed follow-ups to the Sega Genesis / Mega Drive, because you have the Sega CD, which is an add-on to the Mega Drive, and is the reason why Nintendo starts. I mean, you say that, like, I think Sega might be the evil mastermind in the room, because they're the reason why Nintendo and Sony start talking about putting together a CD attachment to the Super Nintendo. And then when that falls through and Sony's like, fine, we'll make our own game console. And then Nintendo could not compete with what Sony brought to the table with the PlayStation. Like, even now. I mean, the whole third generation of video game consoles is largely forgotten because it was experimental polygon stuff. There are games that are remembered, but, like, in terms of celebration, a lot of it was just ugly, blocky, didn't really play well, because it was essentially, like, an experimentation playground for the new style of gaming.
Yeah,
like,
if anybody out there wants to know why there's not more like emulation and re-releases of stuff from like the Dreamcast era and all of that shit, it's because that stuff was, like you're saying, just it wasn't even fun to play then. We remember it fondly because of how kind of how much it broke the mold on a lot of things. But when it came down to actual like gameplay, there were very few games that were worth going back to, which is why we don't see the same fervor for re-releases that we do for it. It's wild to me because like we have our re-releases of early Nintendo, early Sega stuff, and now we're getting into our re-releases of early like Xbox and PlayStation 2 stuff, but like there's this weird gap in the middle of games that we just don't talk about, or if we do, they get completely overhauled. We don't talk about the PlayStation 1 version of Resident Evil anymore. We talk about the GameCube version and that being the one that everybody wants the remake of, right? Like it's wild that there is this little kind of gap in gaming that we don't really want to revisit, considering how much nostalgia people will bank on in any other aspect of video games.
I'd like to step back to, I said third generation. Third gen is Nintendo Entertainment System and Sega, God, I can't remember, Master System. We're talking fifth gen. N64, Sony PlayStation, and Sega Saturn, that's fifth generation. I'm sorry, I misspoke of that. This is the third generation in my lifetime, which is also technically not true because I had an Atari 2600 as a very young man. But like the same way that when Atari games come back, they are essentially that same game. The fifth gen is very analogous to the first generation of gaming in a lot of weird ways, because they're kind of hard to look at, but there were people who had fun with them at the time. So
and like important shit was figured out in that
time,
right? Like we figured out so much stuff about how games can and should work on like 3D planes and stuff, and what that would mean in terms of getting it into people's homes and the marketing and aspects to it and all that. Like there is so much that we learned from that era, and like I said, it just makes it even weirder that we don't have like this huge fervor of people demanding like a re-release of Seaman, you know.
And that's technically sixth gen. Dreamcast is in the same gen as GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. Kind of, sort of. It's like a mid-level revision, but. Mm-hmm. Like, so Sega gets the PlayStation to come along. So then when they're like, oh, we finally figured out the problem with the CD stuff, let's do Saturn, they end up getting beaten by what PlayStation is doing with Sony. So it's like, well, then we'll step back and we'll wait. And then once everybody else has released their like next gen sort of system, we'll drop the Dreamcast. And yeah, no, like it is the first official release of the 4th generation of consoles, because it's like 128-bit system, and some of the games look incredible. Like the first Soul Calibur game on Dreamcast blew me away. I'll admit
Dreamcast had the Knights game there, right? Evernights or whatever it was.
Knights, just Knights into
Knights,
Dreams.
yeah.
That's actually
Yeah.
Sega Saturn.
That's Saturn.
That's a Saturn game.
Yeah,
and that's an incredible game too. It's just the fact that the Saturn was so much more expensive than what Sony was willing to sell the PlayStation at such a loss just to show Nintendo, you fucked up by not playing ball with us.
Right.
It's such oh god, like what video game history is incredible, and we've just kind of like stumbled into it half-cocked because of a discussion about Sonic the Hedgehog and the fact that Sega was never really able to find the perfect niche for that character. There's like, we'll just keep exploring and experimenting. Sonic's in a fighting game now. Sonic's in a racing game now. And it's really weird because I say all that stuff and Mario's in a fighting game. And Mario's in a racing game. But Mario gets to learn from the mistakes that Sega made with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Well, and I think, and I don't know how much we want to do this, but like, it's hard in a week when they both release games in these just tentpole franchises in video game history, like both get a release in this week, and the history of both of these franchises had made it such that there is clearly one that is the exciting release, right? Like I know that there were people that were excited about the Sonic one, but as you mentioned, even that has kind of been tampered down a bit since it has come out and has not been amazingly well received, like all Sonic games over the last 25 years. But like, then you have Mario coming out, and it feels kind of big, right? Like this feels like a huge thing right now, and the reason being that yes, they got to learn from some of the mistakes that Sega was making, but also Nintendo just had a really good, solid handle on Mario as a franchise, and then they let it get weird. Like the ways in which they made some early mistakes with Mario. I mean, look at Mario 2, right? And the whole like, we're just gonna reskin a different game with Mario stuff because Mario's so big right now, and we don't want to waste the time developing a Mario 2. And then they eat shit on that for a little bit. Although even that game now has its mega fans, right?
I mean, because
they come back.
It feeds into the series. Like the exploration aspect that we were celebrating in Mario games really stems from, let's reskin Doki Doki Panic into Super Mario Brothers 2 in the West. Because the one that we developed, like the quick shit, like it's on the disc system. So like you go to the kiosk, you put it on there. If you hate it, you come back, you buy something else. Right? Like the fact that the disc system and what it allowed Nintendo to do in terms of like kind of just pumping out games that didn't have to be the greatest.
Right.
But that exploration aspect comes into play in Super Mario Brothers 3 because a lot of people start thinking about exploration in the Mario games.
Right.
So
and it marries kind of that exploration aspect of 2 with the platforming speed kind of fun of the first one,
right?
And you get that in 3, right? And that's what I mean is they start to really kind of nail down and solidify what they want Mario games to be, and then Super Mario World just kind of really just like nails it down and just says, this is it. This is going to be what we consider to be a Mario game going forward. That doesn't mean that we won't make other games that feature Mario. That doesn't mean that we won't have fun with these characters in other ways, but they spend the rest of their time with this franchise coming back to some very basic stuff in this formula that we see in 3 and in Super Mario. And going forward, that is the right, that is what we see as Mario games, right? I can't do that with Sonic. I just like, as much as I want to point to things like Sonic 1 and 2 as like those are what define a Sonic game, anything other than that is weird. They haven't made a Sonic game truly like that that has succeeded and blown people away since that one back in like what, 1993, 95.
So I would say Sonic Mania. I don't want to be a Sonic Mania eraserist. The entire Sonic community says that Sonic the Hedgehog 4 does not exist, which hurts me a little bit because I remember.
Did they ever finish it?
They did episode 1 and episode 2, and episode 2 kind of comes to a conclusion. So it doesn't.
There was originally a plan for 4, though, wasn't there?
Yeah, there was. You can find differing things, but because of the reaction to the first one, they're like, we just need to finish it with the second one. But it was supposed to be a multi-episode thing, sort of inspired by what gaming was doing at the time, where like, we'll release what we have, and then you'll get another episode later on down the line.
Yeah, we'll release bite-sized pieces of this game, and then eventually there will be a full version. It's the Telltale method that had kind of overtaken at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that and Sega is always willing to try something new, and they're always kind of willing to try something new, specifically with Sonic the Hedgehog, because of the malleability of the character. So that's why he gets thrown into it. And Sonic the Hedgehog 4, the first episode, I liked it.
You say malleability, and I just say foundationless, but go ahead.
I mean, mine is the spun buzzword that they would use in the meetings, right? You say foundation.
It is literally like, because there is this undefined thing about Sonic that they can do whatever the hell they want with him, essentially.
Right. But then I guess I call it malleability because then you have something like Mania that really plays on that and celebrates his entire life as a character. But, I mean, we're getting away from it there. So we're going to use it with that. And I liked Sonic the Hedgehog 4. I enjoyed it so much that, I mean, I was working for Carnival at the time when the second one came out, and I jerry-rigged a way to download Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 2 while I was in the middle of the ocean. Because, like, you weren't supposed to be able to get your, like, game systems online. Like, it'll use too much bandwidth. So I just jerry-rigged it from my laptop that was running off of Wi-Fi internet in the middle of the ocean to deliver internet to my PlayStation 3 in order to download the game. So, like, I was so on board for it. So then to feel like it doesn't matter, it doesn't even count. But then Sonic Mania, I don't know, I would imagine you have never played Sonic Mania as someone who doesn't have the affinity for the character.
No, I touched Sonic Mania for about 20 minutes just to remind myself that I don't play Sonic games. Like, that is my history with Sonic Mania is basically my history with any quote-unquote mainline Sonic game of the last 20 years. Is like, I play it for about a half an hour, and then I say to myself, yeah, these are not my games, and I don't play them any further.
I've never finished Sonic Mania. There's my deep, dark confession. I've gotten to the final zone. I've gotten to the final boss.
I'm so disappointed in you.
Actually,
I am getting more disappointed in you with more details that are coming out from this story. What do you mean? You got to the final boss and you've never finished it?
I've never finished it. I'm just like, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I'll have to check my trophies. Maybe I'll come back and I can say, oh, I finished it. But I don't think I do. I think that like something came up and I never finished it and then I didn't have the drive to go back to it. Which is crazy to think of, but like Sonic Mania, and the reason why I bring up Sonic Mania is eventually we're going to flip the switch and talk about Super Mario Brothers Wonder. And I think we're getting to that point. But the last thing that I want to say is I was one of those people who was excited about Sonic Superstars. I was excited to play the game. And then, I mean, I played Sonic Frontiers and I played like crazy the first couple days it was out and then just stopped, and I still haven't finished Sonic Frontiers. Though, in my defense, Sonic Frontiers was only recently finished with a free upload, download DLC sort of thing. So I don't think I'm the asshole there if they're like, no, admittedly, we didn't finish the game.
I mean, like we can't really, we can't breeze too far past Sonic Frontiers only because, like, it was clearly Sega's answer to Mario Odyssey, right? Like in this leapfrogging of these two franchises over the years of trying to do this and then try that and blah blah blah. Like it was their attempt to do like, hey, how do we evolve the Sonic formula into this open world concept, a la Mario Galaxy, right? And you got Sonic Frontiers, and I know a lot of people that found themselves surprisingly enjoying themselves playing that game. I don't know too many people that feel like they needed to go all the way with it. And then hearing that that it didn't really end and there was this like DLC update that came out that basically like fixed the ending of that game essentially, which is just such a notorious thing in video games, right? We've talked about this millions of times with bigger games like Mass Effect and stuff like that. The idea that that could happen to a mainline Sonic game in Sonic Frontiers and that not be bigger, like a bigger deal. Like basically they announced like, sorry that we needed to do it this way, but this is it. Not even sorry. They don't even see it as like an apology, but like, you know, for the community to recognize it for what it is, them finishing that game and it happening in this way and it not being a huge uproar tells you everything you need to know about the state of that game in terms of its fan base.
So I'm going to sum up my problem with Sonic Frontiers. It's going to be quick. In the first level, you collect all of the Chaos Emeralds. That's how you trigger the fight. You have to get all 7 Chaos Emeralds to fight the boss of the first zone. And then when you beat the boss of the first zone, you're like punched by them, even though you destroyed them, sending the Chaos Emeralds flying across the world into the second area. And I'm like, this Dragon Ball bullshit, I'm not here for. I'm not here for you had them. Now we've found a contrived way for you to still be victorious, but you lost them. I wasn't interested.
The idea with Dragon Ball is always that you get them together, you get one wish, and then they scatter again. That's just the way Dragon Ball works.
Right, exactly.
Don't bring Dragon Ball into this.
Well, I bring Dragon Ball into it because
the name out of your
Sega Sonic the Hedgehog drew Dragon Ball into this when they introduced Super Sonic, who's just the Super Saiyan Sonic.
Yeah.
So, and in all the other games, once you get the Chaos Emeralds, which is what triggers Super Saiyan Sonic, you always have that. So then, like, oh, he can be Super Sonic for a little bit, but then the Chaos Emeralds will scatter all over and you have to collect them again to be Super Sonic. No, Don't fuck you. Don't Dragon Ball what was the core concept of it. Maybe don't make me turn into the strongest form of Sonic just to fight the boss of this area.
Or... Like, there's so many different ways you do that. Like, if your MacGuffin is you need to collect all of these Chaos Emeralds together in order to do this, make it literally you need to collect pieces of a Chaos Emerald. In fact, I think you've done that in other games before. And then you piece together one, get these superpowered abilities long enough to defeat the boss of this island, and then you go to the next one. There's such a narrative. There's such a better narrative way to talk about this carrot and stick process of go out and collect the emeralds, put them together, have the power, go forward. Like, you can do that in such a better way.
Yeah, I'm just like, I have no incentive to keep playing this game.
We might even talk about an exact mechanic like that in the new Mario game in this very new release that is not necessarily my favorite implementation of this concept either, but certainly better than that.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. So, I mean, so then Sonic Superstars, I was excited to play. But when I, saw the cost and I saw other people who like Sonic games being like, I don't feel like it was worth it, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wait till it's cheaper. Because I still want to play this game, but right now, what I am seeing from other people who like Sonic games is wait until it's cheaper. Especially when... 4 days later, not only am I getting Super Mario Brothers Wonder, but I'm getting Spider-Man 2. Mm-hmm. So, there are other games I care about that, it will matter if you play them this weekend. Sonic Superstars does not feel like one of those is going to have huge ripple effects across popular culture.
No, it'll probably at some point you'll see it for $40 full price, and maybe that'll be the right time. And especially
I think I'm waiting until 20 personally, but that's me.
No, yeah, when that's what I'm saying is it'll drop to 40, then you'll find it on sale for 20.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at with that game. I'm ready to flip the switch, Siege. Are you ready to grab the Wonder Flower and start talking about Super Mario Brothers Wonder?
The only last thing I want to say about Sonic is that there's clear reasons why we are not talking about some of the larger stuff in the Sonic franchise that we can't talk about. I mean, I could say the concept of movies and television exists still, right?
Exist,
There's reasons that we're not talking about that side of the Sonic stuff, which is a shame, because if you really want to hear me fanboy about Sonic, that's what we would have to talk about, right? Yeah. It's not that I don't feel like the character has... I love the character of Sonic as a concept, its history, the weird shit that they do with it. I do adore all of that stuff. But when it comes to dropping $60 to spend 10 hours playing a video game version of Sonic, that ain't my bag. There are versions of Sonic that I do enjoy. We literally can't talk about them.
I mean, as everything, we have to thank Archie Andrews and his comic imprint for making Sonic the interesting character that he is in other forms of media.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you want to talk about some of the... And, like I'm not gonna lie, a lot of my knowledge in that regard definitely comes from a single episode of Unraveled that Brian David Gilbert did back when he was working for Polygon back in the day. And there's a phenomenal thing that he does on the quote unquote Sonic Bible that I think everybody should watch just to get kind of a handle. Especially, I would say, if you don't know much about Sonic, especially if you're not big into Sonic, you should watch that particular video. But beyond that, like what the comic books did in order to introduce like background stuff for Sonic and going forward, like certain abilities that Sonic seems to have that the games never touch on, but the comics were very happy to dive into.
Yeah. Like everything, it's all owed to those original Archie Sonic comics, and they're great. They're something that I will celebrate 100,000 times over.
Yeah.
And I am very thankful that my parents, specifically my mother, whenever she saw something that I enjoyed from another type of media had an Archie comic, it usually wound up in the house for me to experience. And that is one that I am very thankful for.
Yeah.
So,
like, this is not... I don't want this to be the shitting on Sonic and let's talk about how cool Mario is episode, because that's what's about to happen, folks.
Yeah, but it's about to happen because of 30 plus years of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, God, yeah, we're reaching on like the 40th anniversary for Mario is right around the corner. It's insane. I know, right? Like, whew. But yes. So let us grab the Wonder Flower and talk about Super Mario Brothers Wonder. Sejan, I'm gonna defer to you.
It's getting weird. Dev, colors are changing, pipes are moving, flowers singing.
I will defer to you because I will admit here, I was able to get my hands on the game a little bit early. So I have already finished the game twice through. And this morning I tried to do a third time through before I was like, I can't dedicate to this. I have things I have to do. But I am
so I appreciate the idea that you're going to defer to me because you know that I'm nowhere near that level, right? And I will definitely admit that I am not. I got the game when it came out yesterday, and I also have a life beyond this, so I wasn't able to dedicate all of my time to finishing it. I'm just mad at you for getting it early. We're not gonna dive too deep into that, but yeah, the idea that I knew that you had this game before me was already pissing me off, and then I got my hands on it and I was even mad.
Yeah, no, I'm not, dude. That sucked because like even just time zone differences. I was at Target when they opened yesterday to get a copy of it for Dale and for myself, right? Because even though I had earlier, if I wanted to have a physical copy of it, right? It's very different from having just a digital. Plus, I got the shadow box, which is not very impressive, but I have it, so there you go. So I got it at 8, got home, and we started for 9 o'clock, right? Like with travel time and all of that, and I mean it was an adventure at Target. I could have talked about Target this whole episode, and just the 7 fantastic interactions with Target employees and the one negative one. And that sucks that there's that one negative one, and it really does color what were fantastic interactions across the board. But so I got it. So I started at 9 o'clock my time. It's still 7 a.m. for you. And I don't know if you're up at 7 a.m. I don't know what time you wake up most days.
No, I definitely. No, I mean, I am like slightly diagnosed manic depressive with definite sleep issues attributing to anxiety. Like there's believe me, 7 a.m. is a good friend of mine. But there's but I want to. I definitely have lived that life of the I'm gonna get up at midnight to make sure this game is downloaded, and as soon as it's unlocks at 2 a.m. Pacific or whatever nonsense, I'm going to get it and play this. I am past that point in my life, and part of that is because I realized that doing that to myself was causing me to look at certain games in a negative light, that it wasn't actually their fault. It was because I was like playing them coffee fueled, no sleep, and like forcing myself to get to areas in it that I didn't need to be forcing myself to. You know, I have I have long come to terms with the idea that forcing a person, including yourself, to partake in a thing is the worst way to introduce them to a thing, right? If there's a movie I want to see and I realize I'm going out of my way to force myself to go and see it on opening weekend, and it is like really kind of like fucking my life up because I'm forcing myself to spend minimum 4 hours doing this thing, that maybe is going to color the way in which I take that movie in, right? And the way that I think about that movie going forward and blah blah blah.
I
Just as
can't
much the
help but
same way that if you
feel
have a good
there's a
experience,
little
it
bit of symbolism in you saying a movie the week it comes out this weekend, but we can't discuss it. I just want to address that.
yeah, no, I know, but
Yeah.
but like in general, right? Or like if there's like a song, right? Think about any time that you force a song on a friend and then you're sitting there for the 5 minutes that song is playing, just looking at them, like waiting for their reaction, and their reaction is just like, like no, you're supposed to love this thing, right? No, that's not the way you do it, right? Like you let it organically work your way into your life. So with that in mind, my morning for getting Mario and diving into Mario Wonder was as chill as I could possibly make it. I got up, I did my breakfast thing. I'm still doing some school stuff here and there, still applying for jobs and stuff. So like took care of some like life stuff first. And one of the big things I wanted to do with this game is that as I am currently in the process of looking for work and money is tight, I budgeted very specifically in order to get this game and the upcoming Mario RPG re-release, both using the voucher system. I wanted to try the voucher system with Switch. I've been wanting to since they announced it. Two games like this coming out a month apart from each other felt like a really good way to go about it, and it helps me save some serious cash on both of them. So that's what I did with mine. Is I also then purchased the voucher, went through that whole thing, made sure I understood how that was going to work, saw what that process looked like, downloaded the game. That needed its time to do its thing, and then I finally sat down to actually play it, coffee in hand, completely ready to just dedicate as much time as I wanted to it, and I had a fucking blast. I was able to enjoy my first couple of moments with that game like completely like without any distraction, without any worry, right? So I gave this game the best opportunity that I possibly could, which is to say that like which isn't to say that like the game needed that because there was some reason I didn't want to play it, but because I knew how excited I was, I wanted to make sure I was not going to like screw myself by like diving into this game in a way that was going to make me really aggravated. And like because of that, I've also not played it as much as I probably could have over the last couple of days. There's been a couple of things that I've run into in playing that game that have been challenging, but to the game's credit, like never unexpectedly, always fully aware that the systems that they've got in place to keep you kind of informed of what you're getting into are really good, really awesome. And the ways in which I don't need to be doing some things really evident in this one more than any other Mario game do I really feel like I've got quote unquote permission to maybe not do some things at first and come back to it later, that sort of thing. Like there's a lot of stuff in this game that really want all levels of player to feel like there's something here for them and that you're not being gated from stuff just because you're maybe not playing 110%, right? This is not as much as there is challenge to this game in ways I've never been challenged in Mario games before and I love it. There's not really a feeling of like you need to get good at this one, right? And I feel like sometimes before this game came out, I was spending the week playing some Mario, the Wii U one there, the Super Mario Brothers
New
U
Super
and the
Mario
Luigi
Brothers U.
U.
Yeah.
Yeah, the like the combination one that they put out on the Switch a while back. I was replaying some of that, and there's definitely some moments in that throughout where it feels like, man, this game just needs you to get good, and it sucks. Like it is not fun playing some parts of that game for me, especially on my own. That game's a blast with other people and much easier to get through, notably, when you're playing with multiple people. But on my own, there's some elements of that game that I don't really enjoy going back to. And you're kind of forced to go through because you need to get through them in order to get to other parts. I'm not feeling that with Wonder yet. If I'm coming up against anything where I feel like, oh, this is a little much for me right now, I'm able to just walk away. You know, we talked about this a lot with Tears of the Kingdom for me, is that like the ways in which the game allows me to kind of do what I want when I want has made this experience so much more pleasurable than some other experiences in this very franchise. Um, I'm only in the Mountain Kingdom, where you go up into the mountain and you get a couple of snow levels and stuff.
Puff Puff
Like
Peak.
that
World 2.
yeah, Puff Puff Peak. Yeah. So in that, I've seen the opening tutorial area, which is really interesting and really cool for a Mario game. Not that those have never existed in the Mario franchise before, but so noticeably like this is the tutorial. They basically tell you use these first couple of levels to get to know how to play the game, which is important because there's some really cool new stuff in Wonder that you need to really be ready for before you get into some of the other levels, right? But then right after that, immediately you get some pretty basic opening Mario worlds with like rolling hills and mountains and stuff like that. You get introduced to a desert area for like a hot second, and then all of a sudden you're in like the water area, and now I'm up in the snow area. Like I'm moving through biomes really quickly in Mario with the understanding that I'm also going to be coming back to some of these areas, because not only is it that I'm not completing certain things, but like there is stuff that is definitely back in, like, for instance, the aisles, the pedal aisles that you're in. They tell you you're going to be coming back to this area a lot because it's really the intersection between worlds, and because of that I'm able to see levels and stuff that I can't get to yet, but I know I will be getting to, and I can see the shortcut setups that they're already putting in for me to then get through stuff later. So like I'm prepared for that stuff, and that's cool. Like it's incentive for me to get to these areas because I understand it's going to do this, it's going to unlock that. Really, really, really fun carrots at the end of all of these sticks that they're putting out there for me to go after, right? Um, I'm adoring the way that this game is built in that regard. But again, because of that, I'm only in what you could essentially call the second world of this game so far.
Yeah. And that's that's
So
awesome.
when you say that you've completed it in that regard,
Yeah.
like what does that look like? Like I'm not asking you to give me like a breakdown of every level, but like is there like Super Mario, the Wii U ones that I was just talking about, Super Mario U, right? Those ones kind of go on for a little bit. Famously, Super Mario 3D World, right? Like has like six endings to it, right? Is it like that? Is it that there's more worlds and more worlds and more worlds on top of it, or is what I see currently pretty much what I'm gonna get?
So there are 8 worlds in the game. 7 worlds are the regular game that you're playing. I guess spoilers. You can kind of see that though when you see the map. It denotes those 7 worlds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will say the only time I got kind of tripped up is that when I was in that first initial world, not the tutorial area, but the very first kind of like level world, and they tell you about the map, and you look at it, and it only shows you that area at first, and I was like a little disappointed. I was like, oh, it's just kind of this, which is cool. Like it seems like there's a lot here, and there's potential for like going back, and there's potential for buried stuff and things like that. But then it unlocks the larger map like a couple of levels later. I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. It wasn't clear to me at first that there was more map. So anybody in the first couple of moments of that game where you feel like things do not seem as big as what we're talking about, that this game gets very big eventually,
Yeah.
and it's really cool the ways in which it does. Sorry, go ahead though.
Yeah. So I mean, so there's the 7 worlds that you can see when you look at the map, and then there is an 8th special world. But I really like how they did the special world because you have to enter all of the levels from the world where it is. It's not like Star World, for instance, from Super Mario World, where once you're there, you can go to all of the levels. You have to find the special world entrance in World 1 to get to that level to then move forward. But then once you get to it, you're like, oh, I'm at this central place, but you can't do anything until you've completed more levels. So that's
cool.
Really, really cool. I really, really enjoy that aspect of it. And the way some of the special stuff, it's really interesting how it's hidden. So there are 8 worlds total. I have a couple of tips and tricks that I want to let people know. And here's kind of the biggest one that I have to say. Don't finish the special world until you've beaten the game. And I'm not saying don't go to the special world when you find them. You can interact with everything, but you're able to get enough Wonder Seeds to get to the final level of the special world well before the end of the game. Don't be a Devin Decker and go do that level as soon as you can. Wait until afterwards because it spoils stuff. It spoils some like really cool things that then when I got to them in the regular game, I'm like, no, this is boring. I've already done this. And it's like, well, because you're an idiot and you didn't. I mean, I kind of also point the blame at Mr. Nintendo for like, maybe you lock this one behind finishing the game before I can get there. Like, I
I bet
wouldn't
you
be
though.
mad about that.
One of
Like,
the things I hinted at earlier, and one of the
yeah.
things that I really am enjoying is that every level gets a difficulty rating, and it is plastered right on the damn thing when you walk up to it. You know immediately whether or not you're going into a 1-star level or a 4-star, right? I imagine that the special world just is full of a bunch of 4-star stuff,
Oh, it's
right?
where you start seeing 5 stars.
Oh, well, see, so
Yeah.
all the more to my point is
Yeah.
like part of that you have to understand is the Devin Decker notion of like this. I accept this challenge, and it's like, well, maybe that's not. It's not necessarily being put there as a challenge. It's being put there more as just like a hey, maybe you don't do the 5-star stuff until you've really knocked out some of the lower level shit, huh?
Yeah. And then, but I mean, I was 100%ing each level as I went through. That's the other
Yeah,
thing I want to tell about is checkmark system. If you go to the map and look at the level, there's a stamp of a check mark that says you've done everything. So if you're
yeah.
going for the 100%, like, that's your best friend.
And by
Because
everything you mean all Wonder Seeds, three mega coins, and gotten the flag, right?
and gotten the flag, yes. All
Yeah.
wonder seeds that are in the level, the 3 coins, and then the flag. But also, like, if there's a secret exit, like, that's not denoted. Like, it might look like a level has just the 2 wonder seeds, but until
Yeah.
you get the secret level, it's not going to show up the third
and then
one.
and then you find out that there's a third secret wonder seed, and you're right, that is one of the
Yeah.
few things that is not necessarily denoted. And I'm kind of okay with that in the one hand, because like it's cool that like I because this is what happened to me is I found a secret exit that I didn't realize was a secret until I
Mm-hmm.
got out, and it showed that I had gotten wonder seed number 3, and I was like, wait a minute, I thought there were only 2 when I first went in, because it denotes how many Wonder Seeds are in the level, I thought.
Yeah.
But actually, there was actually a third one.
Yeah, which is why that check mark on the map screen is so helpful when you're
Mm.
looking for 100%. Because there are a couple of them, I'm not going to spoil what they are. You can look at it where, like, oh, I don't have the check mark yet, but I have the flag, I have the seeds that are shown, and I collected all 3 purple coins, 10
Yeah.
coins. So, like, I guess I need to go back in there and find it. So it's just
Yeah,
it's a really nice system, and the reason why I celebrate that is Super Mario World introduced if a world is yellow it has 1 exit, if a world is red it has multiple exits, and that's great. But new Super Mario Brothers, like, there was never any denotation on the map if there was a secret exit. You
yeah.
just kind of had to guess that there might be one. So that checkpoint system, the fact that you get a check mark when you've 100%ed the level, I really, really like.
Hmm.
So that's it. So that's it. So when I say I 100%ed it, there are, if you look at the file screen, there are like 6 blank spaces below where it shows how many royal seeds you've collected.
Right.
Having all 6 of those is the full 100, and that's tied to different collectibles and things like that.
Right.
So I mean, it's just the 8. It's just the 8 worlds. It's a shit ton of levels. I couldn't tell you how many courses there are. But the last one that I got was related to purple coins, which is tip and trick from Devin Deck. And number 3, spend your purple coins.
Oh yeah.
You might not get to the cap of $9.99 as quickly as I did, but when I got to $9.99, and it is a cap, it is the only relic of video games that Nintendo seems to be completely married to, is like there's a limit to how much currency you can have on hand at any given time. $9.99 is the cap, and as soon as you hit that $9.99, go spend money. I did this in my playthrough yesterday, which that's what I really wanted to talk about on the show, was how I played through the game yesterday, because it totally changed my perception of the game after doing it 100%. You should always have on hand 300 purple coins for like interstitial spending within the worlds. I saw yesterday we did online, like, you went to Roller Cooper Derby, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So you found a place where if you spend coins, you can open up a pathway.
Uh-huh.
Those happen.
Yeah, so there's a way, to spend coins to unlock more levels. You can spend coins to get different badges, and badges are important to this game. We'll talk, like, that's a huge element to this game. And the other thing is that the one of the driving MacGuffins of the game is you have to collect wonder seeds in order to get around, and there's always there's always one wonder seed in a shop. It's kind of like Mario Odyssey in that way, where like there was always that one star or moon hidden behind buying something in the shop, right? And in some places you could go and buy multiple, I think eventually, right? Wasn't there some places where you could just buy like forever? But like that idea that it's a quick, easy way for you to kind of up that wonder seed count so that you can maybe get through. Like if you're really struggling on a particular level and you just can't get that one hidden wonder seed in the level, it might be worth just going to the shop and just buying the one that's there to get you to the count that you need in order to unlock further stuff. And then you can always come back later, right? Like, so there's that whole element too. But yeah, before we get too deep into how we played and where we're at, like our final thoughts on it and all that, like we should talk about some of the weird shit in this game, because like one of the things that this game is doing, and this kind of is in line with some of the stuff that they were saying before it came out about how they really wanted to give this game room to breathe. They were pretty much given carte blanche to just work on the game until it was finished. They weren't married to a release date because they really wanted to make sure they were getting things right. And like that's because there is some stuff that they are doing in this game that if they didn't get it 100% right was going to be pretty wild and weird. And I think the best example of that is the badge system. I think the badge system, at least so far for me, has been a blast, but it also is a wild way to introduce power-ups and new moves to the Mario set, right? I think the best way to think about it is like, the way that Mario games play, right? Especially with like later Mario games with things like wall jumping and sliding and ducks and different power-ups that you can get from various things. Like there's already all of the buttons on a Switch controller were pretty much all already taken up by things that you could do, right? Introducing any new mechanics was really going to get hard when there weren't more physical things to touch on your controller to actually make those things happen. So by introducing the badge system, it allows them to introduce this whole new set of moves that you don't always have on you. You need to put a badge on in order to have a certain move. Means that they can dedicate basically one button to your quote unquote special move, depending on what you have equipped. If the badge you have equipped even does something like a move, because there's also some passive badges that you can put on that just do some things in the background that aren't necessarily, like getting more coins for killing dudes or getting a designated power up at the beginning of each level. If you are small, if you are already big, I don't think it'll give it to you, or at the very least, if you're already super, you won't get it, right? But like things like that are really, really cool ways to change up some stuff that you can be doing in Mario without having to completely retool the way that Mario plays. I don't know if things get weird later on, but like I'm loving the badge system right now.
So the badge system is fantastic. It's a really interesting way. The way that I said that Sonic Mania is this love letter to Sonic and everything that came before, the badge system, which feels lifted directly from Super Mario RPG and then going forward into all of those, because you can always equip and like accessory that gives, different moves and items and things like that.
Yeah, the Paper Mario games are really big on that thing too. Yeah.
Well, I guess I think of like the safety badge is one of the first things that you can get in Super Mario RPG.
No, so RPG definitely for sure introduces it. And then you see it in like Mario and Luigi, you see it in Paper Mario.
Yeah, Paper Mario where you can change your color to look like Luigi or the other people with badges. Or like extra damage when you get a jump attack correct. So like it's real cool how they brought that forward from the RPG games. And then all of the jumps that you unlock, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I think you've seen most of them if you're where you are. It harkens back to styles of jumping that Mario games have had in the past. Like the parachute cap, that's just Peach's floating from Super Mario Bros. 2. The floating high jump, that's Luigi's jump from Super Mario Bros. 2. The crouching jump is from Super Mario Bros. 2. I know that I've all said from Super Mario Bros. 2, but like the wall jump, there's a wall jump one where instead of going out, you go immediately up. That's how wall jump glitches work in Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3. So that in addition to being this way to add a completely different way to play the game without adding more buttons to the controller, as Sejan said, it also adds this really interesting way to play the game as it has been played historically before.
Right. Yeah. It allows you to really kind of change up, and the idea that for the majority of levels you can wear whatever badge you want. Like you can say that, like, man, I really prefer it when Mario has this floating jump, so I'm just going to keep that on all the time, and that's awesome, and it's a legitimate way to play it. You definitely have access to the majority of stuff. You know, there's going to be certain things that are always going to be locked behind those other mechanics because they want you to try those other mechanics. I mean, there are straight up levels that require you to put on certain badges in order to play, and that's cool. Also, have you used the Prince's Choice
I
like
have,
system
yes,
within
yeah.
the badges? Yeah, it's cool that they also give you this little bit of this like randomization slash suggested like like tool to go with the badge system as well, right? Because sometimes you don't always know what you're missing out on, right? If you put on a certain badge and go into a level and then you realize like halfway through, like, man, I really wish I had the dolphin dive mechanic, in the underwater levels. Like, and if you go back and look, you realize, well, it does say right on it that that was the suggested badge to use,
That's the
so I'm the dum
suggestion,
dum for
yeah.
not putting it on,
Yeah, in addition to
right? Like,
Prince's Choice, there's the Prince's Suggestion, where he'll be
right.
like, if you hit the L button right now, we'll put on the best
Yeah,
badge for
there's
this
so
level.
many good systems in place in this game to really try and guide you to what you should be doing, but at the same time encouraging you to do things differently. Like not forcing your hand so much as just kind of guiding your hand. Like really just saying to you, this is what we think you would have the most fun doing, but also live your life, man. There's so much of that going on in this game, and I really really applaud that. Um,
Yeah, it's
we should talk about the. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. And there's also the run I started this morning. You can go badgeless. That's the thing that it really it. You kind of have to look at that because you can remove it so you have no badge on, which
Yeah.
is a whole other way to play the game. Because someone said hardcore badgeless. I saw that on Twitch last night, and then I'm like, oh, so like what? Like you have it but you don't use it, and then no, you can actually remove it. And now the run I was going through, which was semi speed run slash also badgeless, I'm also seeing if you can get through without going through those badge challenges and collecting other badges. So
Yeah,
it's an
I don't know how
interesting
much of
way.
those are required, and I'm hitting them because they're super fun, but
Yeah,
they are only giving you one wonder seed. So like I said before, you could make that up just by buying the one in the shop, you know?
exactly. So it's been interesting the way that you can approach the game. But what
Mhm.
did you want to talk about before I? Because the
Well,
way I approach
so
the game
the
is
only other thing that we should really talk about in terms of what makes this one stand out, well, I guess there's two more things. We got to talk about the Wonder Flowers, which we've already hinted at.
yeah.
Um, but we also got to talk about the two new power ups that have been introduced, or at least I've only seen two kind of out of the ordinary ones so far. And that is the big seller, which was Elephant Mario, right? Like
Wowie zowie!
what's the proper term for it? Do you know? What's
The elephant power up.
is it just Elephant Mario, like
It's
Tanuki
just
Mario,
Elephant
like that?
Mario.
Is
It's
that
like Tanuki
yeah?
Mario, Raccoon Mario, Flying
Right.
Squirrel
Cat
Mario.
Mario,
Yeah,
Cat Mario,
yeah.
yeah. So Elephant Mario, right, which has been so much fun. Like it looked really silly at first when it came out, like they all do. And there was that moment. I had the same moment with Cat Mario back in 3D World where I was like, this looks awesome. I can see the potential for the toy. Like I get the action figure and I get the appeal. And like it'll be silly, but what does it do though, really? They showed a couple of things of it being able to like smash big blocks and stuff like that. But like I wasn't prepared for the water mechanic, which is cool, which obviously makes sense when you introduce an elephant character. Having them be able to spit water is like so obviously the first thing that you do, right?
Yeah.
But also in addition to that, even without the water aspect, just having a straight up just slap attack, which is something that you don't always have in Mario games. That like unless you've got like the fireball power up, right? But having that immediate like walk up and just smack a thing, and like finding out what you can smack and what you can't, or sometimes when you smack some things they behave differently than other things. Like it's a really cool like side effect of that character that I wasn't really ready for. So that has been awesome. But what I can't believe is everybody was so focused on Elephant Mario, and that was what all the marketing was around, and all of the like pre-release stuff was around. Nobody told me I was not ready for Bubble Mario.
Oh,
Like that is yeah, the bubble flower is like a super blast. Especially because the mechanic specifically about it that I'm really adoring right now is the ways in which the bubbles can continue through walls. So you can use that for easy things like damage. You can attack things on the other side of walls if you want to attack it before you get there. But also they hide things in the walls. Like so there's certain flowers that you can grab that are not the wonder flowers, but essentially the wonder buds, essentially. And you can, and they hide those in the wall. So with the bubble mechanic, you can send a bubble through the wall to pop them, and then you unlock stuff. And it's this really cool kind of thing where like you can see stuff that's like clearly in an area you can't get to, and you're just like, how are you supposed to, that is encased in solid wall, how are you supposed to get to that? And I spent all this time thinking there must be like a hidden entrance, or I must have to smash this. And it's like, no, if I had gone 2 more feet into the level, I would have gotten the bubble flower, and then I would have realized, then now I just turn around and get that thing by sending the bubble through the wall.
Yeah, it's I love the bubble mechanic. I guess I was keyed into it. They did show it in that big direct as a new project, but then it was sort of a huge bit of contention in the ROM hacking community as to whether or not Nintendo just lifted the mechanic. Because one of the big ROM hacks that's coming out in November of this year, or at least that's when it's supposed to come out, he has been building it for like 3 years, the creator, and he has a Bubble Mario that works the same way and looks the same. So it's that question of, is this just two different sets of monkeys with typewriters writing the same, piece of literature? Or is this something that like Nintendo saw was like, we would like to use this mechanic?
Well, and that gets all the more nefarious when you think about the ways that Nintendo has really clamped down over the last 5, 10 years on ROMs and ROM hacks,
Yeah.
and shut so much stuff down that when you're working on that stuff, you're not doing that with Nintendo's permission. Like it is not a question, right? This isn't Sega coming in and saying they're going to hire you to make the next game because you did such a good hacking their last one. Like, that's not where you're at. And so like Nintendo taking a mechanic from somebody out there like that, like it's almost daring them to be like, what are you going to do about it? Because like if you openly come out and say anything to us about this, we got your number, bud. Like,
Yeah.
you were illegally working on our game in a way that we have made it pretty fucking clear we are not cool with. So like, what are you gonna do, right? And like, that's not good. I'm not saying that they're in the right because of that, but like, there's kind of no real
You have
leg
no
to stand
recourse
on.
to stand against it.
Right,
It's like,
right. So like, yeah, I had no idea. I didn't
yeah.
know about any of that
Well, I
stuff.
mean, if
I
you
just
want
like,
to, there's a very interesting article on everything Wonder stole from ROM hackers that is a really interesting read on things that showed up in ROM hacks between the last 2D Mario and Wonder. Like, there's enough that there's an article that can be written, because it's not just this one mechanic that was shown off in like I'm gonna show you what I'm doing in Lunar Magic, and look at this new mechanic that I've worked out. Like, there are other like level goals and some of the Wonder flowers and what they do is an interesting thing that's going on in
oh,
that community right now.
I mean, somebody in this house, as we were playing the first couple of levels again, because that's the other thing, is I've also restarted the game once with family members because we wanted to do some multiplayer stuff. And one of the first things that they pointed out in one of the first levels is, man, they really realized how weird Mario fans are willing to get with Mario Maker, huh? Like, there's a lot of Mario Maker 2 stuff that people kind of figured out in the Mario Maker games. If you just did this, and this, and combine these mechanics, suddenly you've got this really cool effect. And then and we've talked about this before. And then other makers in the Mario Maker verse would then take those ideas and evolve them and do different things. And it's kind of a nice thing in the community where people share all these various ways in which they make types of mechanics in those levels, and then people build on them in other ones, right? And there's straight up stuff like that all over this game, to the point where I had somebody in the house that just casually plays those games who was just like, man, they really dug into some Mario Maker stuff on this one, huh? Like, yeah, kind of. It was basically their legal ROM machine that they put out for people to dive into, and now Nintendo has access to all of that stuff for them to do exactly what you're talking about, to then take those ideas and build on those, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, that's been an interesting thing that's been in the water from this, and certainly not like controversial, but it's a little weird to think about that. Like,
kind of controversial, as we've talked about very many times on this show. The people that are in those worlds, that are doing those ROM hacks, that are working on games in that way, with games in that way, those are not the enemy. Those people are your biggest fans. So like the way that Nintendo has reacted to them has been really kind of heartbreaking and kind of shitty. I mean, not kind of, definitely shitty over the last, decade or so. The ways in which they have really gone after these people that clearly love their stuff so much that they're dedicating huge parts of their lives to do this for really no financial gain. There's not much money to be had in making ROM hacks, right? And so this idea that like that they then turn around and use their shit sucks. Like that's not that's there is definitely a grievance to be heard there, right? Whether or not that's ever going to amount to much because of the outside circumstances of things, that's a different conversation. But I think it's pretty easy. For
it
me
is. It's
to
I
sit
guess
back and wag my finger at Nintendo for stealing shit from ROM makers.
I think where I'm saying is that like the layman, the like you have to be involved in the situation to notice it.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
There are people who are going to play this game and have no idea about that. It's hidden down enough that Nintendo walks away without getting any stink on them for their actions, which isn't great, but it's certainly what is happening. There's also another power up. I don't know. You haven't seen it yet. If you're only where you are, do you want to know what that power up is? It's been featured a little bit.
I'm excited to find stuff. So like I don't want to dive too much more into this, because like we have talked a lot about it already. I think it's pretty clear what my feelings are on it. I'm having a freaking blast with it. But like I'm excited to see what else this game has to offer, because like I've just been so excited.
Cool.
I love the different level formats, like the idea that there are some race ones and there are some power-up challenges, but then there's also the good old-fashioned levels and stuff, right? Like I love that kind of stuff that they've done with it too. I'm really, really, really enjoying my time with it so far.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. I mean, the one thing that I want to talk about, like the Wonder Flower mechanic, because it really feeds into how I played through yesterday.
Yeah. So every level has a Wonder Flower that you can grab that makes shit get weird. Sometimes it's not too weird. Sometimes it's just these pipes are going to move up and down for a little bit, and you've got to solve the puzzle of how to get to the right place. Or, there's going to be a bull rush that you have to ride, right? Like that kind of thing. But sometimes it's like, we're just going to have a music video for the next 2 seconds. It's like, oh, okay.
That music video currently blowing up social media, by the way. And like, it's gotten to the point where I'm kind of sick of it. And I don't mean to be rude about that, but it's also like, it's the second level, guys. Like, keep playing the game. Your mind is blown by that. Oh boy, just wait. Which is like the nicest way. I don't want to like spoil like other stuff, but if you liked the Piranha Plants music video, just wait for the other things that get their time in the sun and the spotlight. So there's that. But what I'd like to talk about, the Wonder Flower, cool mechanic, but after completing the game 100%, I wondered how much of a crutch it might be. And I know that's like a weird thing to say, right? I think this game is getting really good reviews. I think even though I've really enjoyed it, I'd probably only give it like an 8 out of 10 for just a couple of little small issues that I have with it. And I'm not going to elaborate that until people have had more time with it. But one of the things that I needed to confirm before like feeling good about that 8 out of 10 is if you can play through the game getting no Wonder Flowers.
Couple of things I will say about that. First of all, there's moments where you're encouraged to do so. One of the secret flowers that I found, or rather when I found a Wonder Flower and got the Wonder Seed, and that was the third one that popped up, and I was like, oh, then what's the second? And then what it was go through this one without getting the Wonder Flower. Like it is part of the game that you can find different Wonder Seeds if you don't or do go and get the Wonder Flower. So that's already kind of encouraged. Then secondly, the only other thing I will say about that is you are kind of talking about the difference between the crutch of the game or the hook of the game.
Right.
Is it a good enough justified mechanic that even though this is kind of what makes this game stand out, it's not something that they lean on so much that without this mechanic, it's a weird kind of conversation to have, because you call it a crutch, but I would definitely call it a hook.
Right. Well, I guess where it comes from is, are the levels designed specifically with that hook, or is this kind of just an empty playground, like to do essentially what you're saying, because it should be a hook, right? The fact that you can play through the level regular or play through it all wonderfied by collecting the Wonder Flower, like, are both of them still fun? Is what I wanted to see. And I am happy to report that there are only 6 Wonder Flowers that need to be collected in order to finish the game. That is insane to me. I beat every level that you can beat without collecting a Wonder Flower before the level starts. Because there are a lot of levels where, like, you're just like, you have to collect the Wonder Flower. That's the whole way this level is built. I don't know how far you explored in the first world, but, like, there's another Bull Rush level where, like, the whole thing is that, like, this whole level is about the Stampede and using the Stampede. So you collect it at the beginning. Bull Rush Express is the name of the level.
Right, yeah. So you collect the Wonder Flower and it starts the mega the mega Bull Rush, and then you ride that over, like, you know, pits and acid and all that stuff. Yeah.
So, like, I wanted to see that, and I'm actually kind of upset that you can't get through the same game. And I guess, like, that's where you talk about, is it a crutch or is it a hook? It's definitely a hook. Like, my initial thesis was, are these just the crutch that this game that would be, like, mediocre otherwise is able to prop itself up and be something greater? Totally not the case. Every level, it feels like, well, most levels it feels like were built as a level, and then they found a Wonder Flower mechanic to layer on top of it. That doesn't change the fact that I feel like some of the Wonder Flowers are a little bit lazy. I don't like the ones where after you collect the Wonder Seed at the end of the Wonder Flower level, it just magically teleports you back to where you collected the Wonder Flower. I really like the ones where getting back to the level is part of the level design.
Right.
But because those two things existed on my first playthrough, that's where I'm like, how much of these levels were built without the Wonder Seed, without the Wonder Flower in mind? And I can happily say
very
that,
early
like,
in my
yeah.
I am very early in my play, so, like, obviously, like, take this with a grain of salt, but, like, I am pretty comfortable with that 8 out of 10 as well so far, because, like, there are definitely some things, like, I you know, we want to get into some nitty gritty stuff at some point, like, we can talk about things like, I don't love the UI all the time. I think some of the decisions that they made in terms of how you get in and out of levels and what that looks like is so overly gamified, which is such a disappointment, because I feel like Mario 3D World has such a cohesive, like, user interface to it that, like, it just is, it is all part of the fun. But then that's also balanced out by, like, I love the little dashes of flair, like when characters go in and out of pipes, the ways in which they behave differently, the ways that things behave differently depending on what power-ups you have. Have you ended, I mean, you must have at this point, you've ended a level not just with the elephant power-up, but also with a full trunk of water?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and it, like, you get a very special little moment with your buddy at the end of that you don't get with any other power up because of what it is. Like, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't mean anything, but it's also awesome that it's there, you know.
It's awesome that it's there, but it's really awesome that it doesn't mean anything. Because there was that moment, that first time that happened, I'm like, am I going to be forced to finish every level as the elephant with a trunk full of water in order to get 100% on this game? Was like my immediate reaction to that. And I'm like, nope. Thank God. Thank goodness they were like, here's a fun little Easter egg if you happen to finish the level like this.
And then you want to talk about your famous issues with the pushing pots issue in the Capcom Zelda games,
yeah.
There is a straight up mechanic in this game that keeps fucking getting me, because you can, I guess this is not a huge spoiler, but like one of the things that you can do in certain areas, sometimes only as an elephant, from what I can tell.
You can do it as everybody, as far as I can tell. It's easier as an elephant if there's somebody pushing on the other side.
Yes,
that's a big thing. You can move stuff even as like the small.
You can push stuff around, including pipes. And that was something that really fucked me up in one of the special levels where you got to search around for stuff. Mm-hmm. I knew where a thing was. I could tell where a thing was, but for the life of me, could not figure out how to get to it. And the secret was there was a pipe that was movable and nearby. And I just didn't. That is such a new mechanic such a bizarre thing and such a new thing. And I feel like the game has really not emphasized that enough with me yet for me to think about that as an option at first. Right. So like there's definitely things that I would criticize in this game in terms of stuff that I feel like it doesn't nail 100%. But there is so much good stuff in this game that it more than makes up for those little moments of aggravation for me.
Yeah. Exactly what you're talking about in the same style of level later on, I was stuck in because I completely forgot about that. And it's like where the last token was I had to push a pipe, and I didn't even think about it because everything else was so designed to finding the proper pipe to make progress that
Well,
I
and
didn't
there's
even
times
think
when
about
you
it.
have to do that, and there's like a half-finished pipe in front of you, so you
Yeah.
kind of are reminded, like, oh, that's right, you can push pipes. I should find a pipe I can move around here. That doesn't happen in this particular case that I'm
Yep.
talking
I
about,
know
and it sounds like
exactly.
maybe the
I
one
know
you're talking
exactly
about.
what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Uh,
and you're just like, I completely forgot that this was a possible mechanic, and it's not always possible. So like,
Yeah, that is
yeah,
something that in my first playthrough I happened to be. Here's another thing that we haven't talked about. I guess it's like tip 4 for me, and it's just an incredible thing. Every character, all 12 characters, have their own sort of Kaizo blocks that would be invisible to everybody else. But if you're Mario, it shows up, or if you're Toad, it shows up. I was the character, so I could see that block. So the way that I got around to actually hitting it was insane. Because then as Mario, I'm like, I don't know how to do it. I don't even know exactly where it is. Like, I don't even know what I'm aiming for. And then I pushed it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's actually the intended answer to this. And then I realized with the power up we can't talk about because you want it to be a surprise. In a later one of those, why I was able to interact with the pipe with the power up I was supposed to, and I still didn't go that one step further to be like, well, maybe you can push that pipe then. Maybe that's why these two things interact that way.
There's so much stuff going on that it's sometimes you get a little lost in the new mechanics, and like that's wild for me to be able to say that about a Mario game.
Yeah.
Like that's where I land on that, is as much as it does get aggravating because I'm not necessarily always feeling like I'm 100% on board with what the game wants me to do. The idea that there's so much new stuff to do in this game that I can still definitively say is a Mario like 2D platformer, like, is awesome. That is an awesome thing to be able to say about a new Mario game, and I am so excited to continue playing it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Excited to finish up my badgeless run to see if I don't have to go into any of the badge challenges.
The multiplayer stuff.
Oh my god, yeah, the asynchronous, like, it was so cool. Like, I know you went into Cooper Roller Derby because I saw that you entered that level. And that made me happy that, like, you journeyed upwards and found that pay station, because Dale never went that far. Like, she completed everything in the desert and then completed everything underground, so she still got enough Wonder Seeds to beat to beat the level and move forward. But I'm like, there's a whole section she hasn't gotten to see, and on some level, I'm excited for her for when she goes back and finds it.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and then like, depending on how you're doing the multiplayer stuff, you mentioned those blocks that only certain characters can see. If that person sitting on the couch next to you happens to have that character, you get the benefit of seeing that stuff. That's not the case if you're doing the online part.
yeah.
So like, I'm playing with these like online ghost buddies that are like jumping around in these things, helping me out in these search levels, and like they're seeing things I'm not, or I'm seeing things they may not. And that becomes really cool in that case in terms of the multiplayer aspect. There's some really fun stuff there. Wild stuff.
Wild, really
doing,
cool
and I don't
stuff,
think this is the last time we'll be talking about this game.
Yeah, this is just initial. But I do want to say, because I did do it, you can get through the game without looking for the Wonder Flowers. And that made me really excited because I was afraid that it'd be necessary. Again, there are at least 6 levels where in order to clear them, you 100% need to use the Wonder Flower. It is the design of the level, and I love it. Like, the way that it's implemented, I'm happy that that's the case. It just made me a little sad that I couldn't do a full flowerless run of the game. Or at least Wonder Flowerless. I'd still pick up Fire Flowers and Bubble Flowers. They're just too much fun. But yeah, that's Super Mario Brother Wonder. Do we have tasks for this week, Sejin?
Well, I'm actually going to play a very Devon card here and be super mysterious and say that If you want to introduce a task, you definitely are more than welcome to. But I am going to suggest that we may not have tasks this week because next week's episode might have to be a little special.
All right. I can get behind that.
Okay. And you and I will talk a little bit off mic about what that means after this, and we will surprise everybody next week, I think.
All right.
I think.
All right. So with that, I do want to give everybody just a little task. It's a small one. I understand what Sejin's saying. And again, if we don't end up touching on it, at least it's a fun thing to do. There's a song by The Buoys. I love this song. I have loved this song ever since I heard it for the first time on Sirius XM as a controversial song. It's called Timothy, and it's by The Buoys, like what you'd find in the ocean, Buoys. So this isn't like a hyper involved one. It's not like
I thought you meant buoys like a ghost, like boo.
No. Still it's called Timothy, and it's about some guys who get trapped in a mine. Listen to it. I think it's thematically appropriate for the year, for the month.
Okay. For the month.
And it's one of those songs that, like, I love this song. I love this song, and I'd love to talk about this song on the show. So, with the criticism of Sejin, which I think I've already sussed that one out, but a small enough one that we can rejoin if next week's is a little bit special, is listen to Timothy by The Buoys.
All right.
Just one time will be enough. And honestly, once you've listened to it one time, I think you'll make it a song that you listen to probably every 3 months. Just to, like, keep yourself humble. But there's that. Again, if you have any thoughts about the Sonic franchise, what we had to say about it, or Super Mario Brothers franchise, specifically Super Mario Brother Wonder right now, that's what's really going to be spinning over here at Say Report Studios. Still send us the emails to thesayreport@gmail.com. We're working on the Discord, but we still have some decisions that we need to make as a team before we finalize it. So email is still the best. So that's thesayreport@gmail.com. And if it's specifically to me or Sejin, please put it in the subject line so that it gets to the proper Say Reporter. With that, any last words from you, Sejin, before we send this one over to Will?
No, I want to go and play more Wonder.
Yeah, no, I don't blame you. All right. So, Will, please take us home. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host, Devin Decker and Sejin Serwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so this is delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.